Hello and welcome to everyone watching live and everyone watching the recording. We are so excited to have you here at Monsoon Leadership's LinkedIn Live series, Job Search Magic, where we are bringing you the wisdom, the resources, and the secret intel you need to land your dream job and your dream salary. I'm Shannon Bowen, CEO of Monsoon Leadership. I am a job search expert, a career advancement coach, and a salary whisperer. I am so excited to introduce you to Sally Loftis, who is here to talk about how to empower job seekers with pay equity data when negotiating a salary. And this is just such a critical perspective of how the collective efforts and individual efforts collide and also can work together for everyone to prosper. Sally is the managing director of Loftis Partners, a 100% women-owned HR consulting firm and a national pay equity expert with a book coming out this summer. So I am so excited to have her here. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm excited to be here. Such a great topic.
I would love to start with how you define pay equity, because I feel like this is just a term we hear out in the ether, but like, how do you define it?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you started with that definition because it is a term that we use a lot. And I define pay equity as an umbrella term, meaning that it covers a lot of things at the same time. You can have conversations about minimum wage, about equal pay, about pay transparency, about pay
Yes.
parity, cost of living. So when I talk about pay equity, I'm talking about all of those things baked into it versus just the strict definition, which might be just like how people are paid compared to similar jobs.
I think there are so many things embedded in that. So I love that you use all those other terms because something I've really worked on is pay transparency, which is an element of pay equity. And so for the nonprofit leaders who are listening on this right now or going to watch the recording and they're
Mhm.
really interested in starting pay equity, how do they start at their organization?
Yeah, that's a great question and one that I get a lot too, is there are a lot of conversations. And honestly, what I'm seeing is that a lot of people are getting asked questions when they're interviewing for open positions, and
Yeah.
candidates are asking.
Yeah,
And they're
absolutely.
like, I don't know what my compensation philosophy is or know how pay gets determined. And so it's really making supervisors or hiring managers be on the spot. So it's really important. You got to pull up with pay equity
Yeah.
and look at it from a strategic lens first. There are 4 phases in the pay equity journey, which is preparation, assessment, leadership buy-in, and implementation. And
Yeah.
the preparation piece is really important. You don't need necessarily any money to start that part,
Okay,
right?
okay. That's really important because I think people think,
Yeah.
especially smaller nonprofits, I have to pay for this big analysis. So tell us how that could
Mhm.
be free because I'm curious now.
Yeah. So the preparation part is really getting rooted in the employee experience. So it's
Mm,
going back and looking at what have employees been telling you? Maybe through surveys, through informal conversations, through exit interviews, things like that. I find a lot of organizations don't have any of that data. So that's their
I
first
know.
step, right?
Yeah.
On the pay equity journey. Then it's trying to figure out where are your employees based? Are they all in the same geographic location? Are they spread across? Because people, if we're going to talk just United States, people are having very different experiences depending
Yeah.
on where they live. So you need to look at cost of living and look at some of the barriers that people might have based in those other locations. So childcare desert, affordable housing, and not like government supported affordable housing. But there's this level of preparation to get rooted in the employee experience because pay
Yeah.
equity starts and ends with your employees that you can do to understand what some of those pain points might be before you go into assessment mode.
I love that. And I feel like right now we're having a crisis in nonprofits of staff attrition. We have a revolving door in so many positions and really empty pipelines to leadership. So my hope for this next year is that nonprofit leaders invest in pay equity efforts and invest in even having a feedback loop with staff. I love you said if you're not having exit interviews, if you're not having
Mhm.
staff salaries and honoring anonymity in those to get real data, right? How do you even know if you're providing a culture that people want to be a part of? And so I think that pay equity is a great way to invest in your staff and to open that conversation. So I just love that everything that you said there.
Thank you.
Going to the job seeker,
Mhm.
which I tend to work with job seekers in
Mhm.
my dream job coaching practice. And something that comes up a lot is how do I know if I'm even being offered a good salary? So how do they find that data?
Yeah, I tell people it starts with your job description,
Yeah.
right? So whether you're inside an organization and you're looking to increase your pay or you're outside and you're trying to get a job, start with a job description, look at the qualification.
Yeah.
and then start trying to find data around that position. There's a lot of data out there that you can pull from, and there's certainly reports, right? Salary
Yeah.
reports you can pull from. There are certainly websites. I tend to say, hey, go get job postings from similar jobs off the live data and kind of put it in there of here's the job title, here's the organization, here's the range if they post a range, here's or just whatever the salary is, here's how big that operating budget is if it's a similar organization, here's the link. And then start lining that data up. I'm a spreadsheet girl. Give me a spreadsheet and I'm super happy. Yeah, I just put that in a spreadsheet. If I was helping someone, try to get 8 to 10 data points.
Yeah.
And that will start giving you an idea because I say 8 to 10 because then you can start being like, is there some consistency in these
Yeah.
ranges? So you have a little bit more idea. And then that gives you live data on if you were going to leave or if you were interviewing for another job, this is what's out on the market.
Yeah. I think that's such a great note. And I tell my clients the same thing. I actually think you should be looking at data all the time to know if you are being paid equitably, right?
Mhm,
Or to market rate, because market rates
mhm,
shift. And so I think you should be constantly looking at similar job titles and also that next step above.
mhm,
And the other reason for that is to make sure that you're getting the skills and experience you need right now in your job to take that next step and
mhm.
to know, okay, that's what that salary range looks like. That's the promotion I want to ask for. And so I also think that's the best data because Glassdoor, Seller.com, it doesn't really reflect the
Yeah.
nuances of nonprofit. And so I do feel like looking at those job descriptions is the best way. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing is that thinking
Mhm.
about when I work with organizations, I'm telling them, who are you competing against?
Yeah.
An organization may not be able to compete with pay alone,
Yeah.
but they may have some other benefits that are worth it, right?
Tell
And
us a little
so
bit about those benefits that people should be looking out for.
there's anything from you may have somebody who has a really flexible, family friendly culture.
Yeah.
And you may have really good healthcare benefits. You may have tuition reimbursement. Obviously, if you work for a nonprofit, you have a government student loan, you work for a
Yes.
certain amount of time, you can get loan
Mhm.
forgiveness. It may be getting experience in a particular geographic location that you want to be in or something like that. So it's good for people to really think through what do I need to live on, right? To live the life I want to live, but are there benefits that support me in that? I'm not saying that those same benefits are going to work for your entire life, but where you are right now, and that might sweeten the deal compared to maybe some other organizations who maybe hire for 40 hours a week, but really you're working 80
Yeah.
versus like an organization says we're hiring for 37 and a half hours
Yeah.
per week and we have a work schedule that supports that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Everybody wants the 4-day work week. But for everybody who's listening,
Yeah.
if you are an ED or CEO,
Mhm.
everybody wants a 4-day work week.
Mhm.
Every single one of my clients says when they're looking for that because I think we need the structure for work-life balance. It's just too hard when you put it on an individual, and we have to structurally build that in. I love that, Sally.
Oh, good.
So I want to dive into the spiciest question. And this gets asked
Ooh,
a lot.
okay.
This was asked to me last week in a workshop I was teaching on salary
Mhm.
negotiation. If you are coming into an organization that's already done pay equity efforts, they've
Mhm.
set their salary band, but then they offer you a job that's at the low end or middle
Mhm.
end of the range,
Mhm.
how do you negotiate to get to the top of the range?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm gonna try to do, like, a short answer.
I'm ready.
I
You can
typically
give a long
yeah.
answer because this
Okay,
is one
okay,
that comes up a lot.
okay. Here's the thing. One is that I typically am working with organizations to
Mhm.
implement pay equity. So,
Yeah.
ideally, that organization, when they've implemented pay equity, have new salary ranges, and they have information
Mm.
in those salary ranges about how you can progress.
Okay.
Not everybody does that. And why I like for
Mm.
groups to do that is because it gives clear pathways for people to grow,
Yes. The pathways to
right?
grow is so important.
And then it gives people more objective criteria for this is how I can increase my pay. I need
Yeah.
X amount experience, this level of technical skill, and this whatever. So to answer your question, I'm like, do they have that in that salary range? I don't know if
Yeah.
they do. It
That's a
sounds
good
like they
question.
don't. And if they don't, then I would just be having a conversation and being like, I need clarity
Mhm. Yeah,
around like
what does it take to be at the top of the range?
just
What skills and
having that
experience,
conversation.
do I need to bring to the table to get that top of the range? Because as you and I know, deep in the
Mhm.
trenches, most people are just trying to get the cheapest labor possible, and that is
Mhm.
just how it is out there. So
Mhm.
we have to help job seekers. And I love that you're working with the nonprofits to be like, hey, maybe not offer the lowest range because that's not going to work on your staff retention. You have
Yeah.
a range, you could give near the top and it would be fine. You're still honoring your pay equity. And also, this person is coming in confident and feeling valued
Mhm.
from day one. They're going to work
Mhm.
hard, they're going to work smart, and they're going to work for you for years. Whereas being like, why am I low end of the range? What deficits do they already see in me? You
Yeah,
know,
I totally agree, and I will say, because whenever you're asking for the clarity that you're talking about, Shannon, how the supervisor or leader, whatever, answers you is gonna tell you. So they may have, quote, unquote, "done pay equity," but if they are not giving an answer where they can explain how people move through those bands, then they've not finished their pay equity work. The purpose of a band in the criteria underneath, again, is putting some objectivity in there
yeah.
and giving people clarity about how they can move, and if the group doesn't have that, they've not done, I think, full implementation.
And we've seen this happen so much. People start an initiative, but they never finish it fully.
Mhm,
I just want to touch on one more thing before we shift
mhm,
to questions that you
mhm,
said that I really love, which is how do I grow at this organization? And I've
mhm,
really been encouraging my clients to ask in interviews, what does your raise and promotion structure look like here over
mhm,
years? Because I
mhm,
think that people need to know that there's opportunities for growth at this organization. And it's not just going to be, I'm stuck at this salary for the next 3 years. Because as inflation is increasing, so if
mhm.
their salary is not increasing with it, they're actually losing money. How do you coach the nonprofits to talk about promotion and growth within the pay equity structure to new staff?
Yeah, I really appreciate the way you frame that because another piece is that you may be losing money by staying at your organization,
Yes.
right? Because typically, if you stay versus if you leave, you're gonna make 2 to 3% probably more leaving than you are
Yes.
staying. To answer your question, how I'm, coaching nonprofits, one, I try to get nonprofits to pull up at the strategic level and really look at this. What do we believe about our people? Where are we willing to compete? And I hate using the term compete because it's like a dominant culture term, but just where are we willing to operate in the talent market? Because I have a lot of nonprofits who are like, I can't pay Amazon
Right.
$20 an hour at this. But so then we talk about, well, what can you offer?
Yeah.
And then the other piece of that is I see a lot of salary compression out there
Yeah.
where organizations, maybe they've done the frontline pay equity work, but they haven't done it across the organization, which is how things get out of alignment. So then maybe the frontline people have gotten raises, maybe the executives have gotten raises because they're trying to retain them, and then the people in between haven't gotten anything.
And I think that is the biggest pressure point is
Mhm,
middle at middle
mhm,
management. And that's actually where a lot
mhm,
of my clients come to me is they're ready to step into director role for the first time.
mhm,
And they have often felt undervalued and held back.
mhm,
I think you're totally right. I do see pay equity efforts on the ends, but you need to retain the middle. That's your
mhm.
leadership pipeline from 10 years from now. And if you're not valuing them through salary and professional development, I think we should have coaching for managers. Like, why is
Yeah,
it only
absolutely.
executives that get coaching?
Mhm.
We have to be nurturing that pipeline to have the diverse leaders that we need to lead nonprofits 10 years from now. I love that you brought that up because that's what I've seen in my experience as well.
Yeah, and I'll throw out just one more thing if you don't mind, is that one thing is that there are a lot of nonprofits out there who are pretty flat
Yeah.
organizations, like, structurally. So, I even work with organizations to say, "Okay, if you have 4 or 5 levels, can you have a manager band and at the top 25% or 30% of that band, it turns into a senior manager?"
Yeah.
And then if they do leave the organization, whoever's hiring them can see progression, and you can still have that within the manager pay band, but it's, again, recognizing somebody's skills and abilities and paying them fairly within those.
And offering them stretch projects. So when
Mhm,
you hit that senior manager, you're more doing project leading. Maybe you're supervising for the first time so that they are really set up to go into that director role next. And I think if we really took the long view in nurturing our staff to be able to grow into leadership roles, we're helping the entire field of nonprofits instead of, I just want to meet my goals at my organization so I look good in my career. And I think if we took that more collective view, which I like that pay equity makes us look collectively, I think that we could really solve some of the staffing problems we're having in nonprofits right now. I know.
I'm
We c
snapping for you.
I
Yeah,
know, we're taking the
absolutely. Yeah.
I wanna shift to some questions from the
Yeah.
audience because we got at some good ones. How can we bridge the gap between an org doing pay equity study and actually paying better? Sometimes it is used to keep everyone paid poorly but equitably,
Mm.
and then sometimes used to be rigid about raises, reducing the option for performance-based job responsibility growth raises. It's a good question.
Ooh, yeah. There's some
I
different
hand it to
levels.
you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Let me answer the first question, then I'll come back to the second question.
Okay.
Are there people out there who do this work and don't do it? Yes.
Mhm.
Are there people out there who maybe try to do this work and aren't doing the full job without knowing it? Yes. One thing that I coach organizations on is when we do a pay equity assessment is that one is I'm trying to say this is a 12 to 18-month process. This is
Yeah.
not something you're going to do overnight. Two is that I encourage people to have an action plan to go along with their results.
Yes.
So sometimes people will do an assessment and be like, oh my God, that's overwhelming, and then never do anything. And then the other thing I tell people is if you never start, you're never going to make progress. So even if you can only bring things up just a little bit, do it. It's
Yes,
worth it. It's
it
how you're
is.
gonna retain people. People are like, "I need this huge transformational gift. I need Mackenzie Scott to come in," and I hope everybody gets that, but you've gotta be able to have a plan and move on it, and there are ways to find the money if you go back and look at your turnover rates, and there's a lot of money that I would say are probably sunk cost in our budgets that we could turn into more pay for people.
I agree, and people are just like, "Oh, there's no money," but there's always money in a budget. You just have to think about how you're shifting around your budget items. Maybe you're gonna
Mhm,
put off that website for one more year, and you're gonna
mhm,
work on pay equity and bring
mhm.
everybody up to market rate because you're like, "We're about to hit a campaign, 3-year campaign, we've gotta retain our staff." But I think there's just a lot of taking people for granted that they're gonna stay. And then they're shocked when people leave. They're
Ah,
all trying to afford this life, and it's expensive in some of the regions we live in.
and I think there's like this great we've called everything great, right, in the last 5 years. The great resignation, the great migration, blah, blah, blah. There needs to be like a great updating around people's personal assumptions and organizations' assumptions about their staff.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
what is it that you believe about your staff
Okay.
now, post-pandemic or whatever phase we're in? Of so what and then as a supervisor, what do you believe? I'm always amazed by how many people are still out there who follow the Douglas McGregor theory X and Y of assuming that people are out to take advantage of you. And that is antiquated, is not true. And but we don't realize how baked those assumptions get into us and
Yeah.
how that manifests in the way that we manage people and pay and benefits. So I think one is there's like this level of people have got to go in and update assumptions. That's why I encourage organizations to do like a pay philosophy that
Yeah.
outline that because also people just need much more explicit communication now
Yeah.
in this new world. I do wanna answer the second part of that question, if that's okay, Shannon,
Go for it.
about the rigid about raises. Oof. Okay, this is where my soapbox starts. But I am an advocate for consciously uncoupling performance from pay, and here is why. I am the type person who thank you. I think one, that just doesn't even necessarily fit in the nonprofit ethos, right? Two is that I think it's much more reasonable to create multiple pathways to pay than just one based on merit or based on a
Yeah.
performance review, right? There's so much research out there about how it's just subjective. Performance ratings are subjective. So if you can create, so to this
And
person's
full of
question,
bias a lot. So,
yes, absolutely.
yeah, it's not objective, and I love time-based retention.
Mhm.
And bonuses because we need people to stay, and money motivates people.
Yeah, I do think if look at my crystal ball here, is that I think the annual raise is going to get turned into the every 3 to 6 months. Not saying you do
I love that.
4% every 3 to 6 months, but it may be like, hey, I'm doing a 1 to 2%.
Yeah,
Doing raises more frequently because I think that's gonna be a motivating factor for
I love
people.
that. I haven't heard that yet, and I love
Well,
that.
and a lot of for-profit organizations do that. I think also having more team-based metrics are helpful, but I think if you just have one way to raise your pay that has been clearly debunked as subjective and biased, that's a problem. But you can reward longevity, you can reward people taking interim positions, you can reward people for growing in their supervisory role. You can
Yeah,
create multiple pathways, and when you do that, then it gives you a level of stability in your personnel budget
yes, yes.
because then you're like, "Oh, this person's hitting their 3-year anniversary, so we're gonna bump
Yeah,
2% on September 1st," versus just being like, "I don't know what we're doing. whack-a-mole it. Let's just pay whatever to retain somebody right now, which you're gonna bleed more money that way.
Yeah. So time is flying. I want to definitely take some time to talk about your book. And I
Okay.
want to invite everyone to my Job Search Magic webinar series this summer that we're going to go through each step of the job search process. And I have a wait list where you get $5 off. So Shay's going to drop that in there. And I want to hand it over to Sally to talk about her book because I'm so excited. I'm going to be one of the first people to buy it.
Yeah, I have a new book coming out in June 2024. It's called The Pay Equity Guide to Nonprofit Organizations. So, exactly what we talked about today. In that book, I go through and talk about the history of pay equity and the way I define
Love
it,
that.
as we discussed today. We talk about cost of living, talk about gender pay gaps, race and ethnicity pay gaps. We talk about caregivers in the workplace and how
Love
pay
that.
practices can support them. And then I walk through the 4 phases that I mentioned today, and then there's a lot of resources there. I have an online website where you can access a lot of this stuff for free. Just go to loftispartners.com. But I'm really excited about putting this into the hands of people because a lot of nonprofits will say, one, we don't have the money to pay for a consultant. And you can do this work on your own without a consultant. Of course, it takes longer, but this book will give you that information. And then I'm excited to engage in conversation with more nonprofits about this because, as we know, nonprofits are connected to funders and government
We are
contract.
in this
Like,
web.
yeah, it's just one piece within the greater web.
Maybe we'll do a monsoon leadership book club. And that would be super fun. So we did just get one question in the chat, so
Yeah.
we're
Okay.
gonna sneak it in,
Yeah.
because it's a good one. So
Yeah.
how can we get nonprofits to give better increases? 1.5 to 3% isn't
It's
acceptable in
not
this
a
economy, especially with lower paid staff.
I think that has got to, again, it's got to be a decision for them and within the leadership. It's really hard as employees, I think, whenever you're in a leadership model or structure that's not willing to have these conversations. I think the question is, how is the company determining raises? I would assume 1.5, 3% would be based on their budget and would be based on whatever the cost of living adjustment
Yeah, I
is
was
with
gonna
Social
say a
Security.
COLA.
If they're tracking COLA, then they should know that it should be higher
Yes.
because you wanna be ahead of COLA. Yeah, I think that's the question, and continuing to ask that helps push people to think about it and potentially have conversations about how they might wanna do it differently.
Going back to something you said earlier to this question, as an employee, maybe asking leadership, "What is your pay philosophy?" And if
Mhm.
they don't have an answer, coming together and saying, we would really like to have a pay philosophy here at this organization. Is that something that we can prioritize in our organizational development? And I actually think that's a neutral way for employees to say, hey, we'd like to have more transparency about how compensation is decided here. And then they would hire Sally to come in and help with it.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, I agree. I think keep asking, keep encouraging, and always tell my clients, follow the energy, right?
Yeah.
It may be that you've got a fire underneath you because a pay transparency law just got
Yeah.
passed and you got to
Yeah.
do something, right? Or it may just be like there's enough people talking that we need to talk about it.
Sally, today was so incredible. I know we're dropping some links in the chat right now so you can get Sally's book, get connected to her. We will be talking again because I feel like we just scratched the surface. And I'm so happy that you're out here doing this work because it's so vital for the nonprofit sector to remain competitive and offer prosperous wages. So I'm so grateful for you. And everyone join us on June 21st. Our next LinkedIn Live will be with Victoria Silverman talking about what recruiters are looking for. Because if you're the first time working with a recruiter, it can feel like, who is this person? What are they looking for? We're going to demystify it. Thank you, everybody, for listening live. Thank you so much, Sally.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.